Soulmates are like two halves of a whole.
Welcome to Soul Guide with Vondi Lozano, a show about past lives, life between lives, and this life.
Hey everybody, I'm Vondi and I'm really excited to share with you today. We've been talking about community this month, and so we're especially focusing on soul groups and soulmates, our communities on the other side, and also ways to have community here on Earth with each other. All right, so here we go. So, getting to know your soul group and soulmate. We had a lot of people saying they might show up today, and I see people coming into the stream, so great to have you. Please feel free to share any questions. That always makes the discussion more fun and lively. So, soul groups can be anywhere from 3 to 25 souls or beings, but usually they're around 10 or 12. It just depends. This is our family of souls, the group of beings, light beings, souls that you incarnate with over and over, and we just change up roles. I say it's like a repertory group. I think I'm saying that word the right way. Like a theater group, where it's the same group of people, but we change up roles in each play depending on the show. Well, in some ways, these lives are kind of like a performance, and we come in to learn these lessons, and we plan in advance with each other who we're going to incarnate with, what we're going to do, how we're going to handle things, depending on the lessons that our soul is learning overall. And sometimes we have soul contracts. If you saw Leah's sessions, or if you'd like to, it's one of our episodes. Leah and her husband had a contract in this life because in a previous life, her contract was to be strong, but she was a little too strong and got carried away. So when she re-encountered her husband in her soul group and realized this was him, she started to cry, saying she had hurt him in the last life. And in this life, the goal was to have more of a balance. So thank you, Leah, for letting us share about your session. Reunion. This is often people's favorite part and the part they're most looking forward to, and one of the most emotional places in the soul, in the other side for the soul. So sometimes they meet you at the gateway. Usually you go to the soul group later on, but more advanced souls, they don't encounter their guide when they cross over because they don't need the orientation. They don't need someone to kind of reorient them and show them around. They go straight into their soul group. So one of the questions we ask is, do you see one large globe of light, or several smaller lights? And if it's a large globe of light, it's usually the spirit guide. If there's lots of smaller lights, they've usually gone straight into their soul group. So I've seen soul groups actually meet them at the gateway, as they're crossing over, and they're like dusting them off, like dusting them off from a hard life. But most of the time, if they're going to go straight into their soul group, they just go right to where the soul group is. So, and otherwise we just ask at a certain point in the session, is it time to reunite with your soul group? And they'll usually say yes. Is it time to go meet your friends? So where do they meet? We ask, what are they doing? How many souls do you see? And that's how we find out more about what's happening. And it's like the hottest day of the year, so I apologize. I'm going to be drinking water throughout the session. So sitting by a river sounds really good to me right now. So locations, they're not real physical locations, but they do appear to us as locations. It's just a way to make us feel more comfortable. So some soul groups are sitting beside a river, relaxing, talking. One person in Ken's session, this is one of the ones in my blog on my website, he said we were chilling. They're chilling at a tropical cafe, like everyone was sitting around in chairs. He said, we've all been out a long time, and it's so good to be back together. Ken was the one who said, this feels like home, more like home than anything I've ever known on Earth. And we hear that a lot. It feels like home. So if you remember Heather's session, she was in one of the rogue soul groups. Hers was in a pub with a fireplace, and they were smoking, drinking, and laughing, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. But her group was kind of a rogue soul group, and they were just hanging out, having a good time. Sometimes people just see like lights in the sky, so they're not even people-like beings. Other times they appear more as people that we recognize. Sometimes people say they're kind of translucent, but really the more they appear human-like is really more for our benefit. And then a very, very advanced group of souls we talked about in the Galactic Beings episode, she just saw colors. And this was her soul group, all these different colors, these very, very advanced galactic beings. And sometimes our soul group is a council. I've had some very advanced souls that I couldn't figure out what was going on. And eventually I realized they're a part of a council. That's their soul group. And so in one of them, I was asking questions and I couldn't figure out what was happening. And finally they said, put that book away. These questions don't apply to this soul. And this was the soul who hadn't come to Earth for her own development. So we weren't going to find out her life purpose. She was here to help raise the vibration on Earth. She and the other members of her soul group were actually a council. And so when I was asking, tell me about your soul group, what do they do? And she was saying, other souls come to us and we give them direction. We give them feedback. And slowly I realized her soul group was a council that other souls came to. And then I loved it in Molly's session. Again, this is another episode that we shared, Molly's Life Between Life session. She was becoming part of the Red Robe Order. So a very advanced group. It felt like a council to me. And she found in her past life session, when she crossed over, she actually encountered them. Usually it's not to your Life Between Life session. And I see David chiming in. Wow, that's advanced, a council soul group, I know. And she saw them in her past life session where she said, my people, how could I have forgotten my people? I miss my people. She just blurted out because it was like, oh my gosh, this is my family. I forgot about my family. How could I have forgotten them? It was really, really a beautiful moment in the session. So figuring out who's who. So usually they'll say, we have this many people and this is what they're doing. And just for my sake, for the facilitator's sake, we'll ask them, can you imagine them positioned around like a clock? Like you're in the middle where the hands go and there are the numbers. So the soul in front of you is at 12, behind you is at 6, to your right is at 3, to your left is 9. And it's just so we can kind of figure out who's who in the session. And then we ask, from what position on our clock does the first soul move to greet you? And then they'll say 12 o'clock. Almost all the time, people say 12 o'clock. Letitia's wishing everybody happy Friday. Yeah, we're so glad you're here. And if it's hot where you are, I hope you are surviving the heat too. Are they male or female? And they'll say this being is presenting as male, female, or kind of nothing, just more light being. And then this is where it gets really fun. Who was this person in your last life? So remember, we do a past life session. And then in the second Life Between Life session, we also do another past life session, but this time we go to your immediate past life. Because we're wanting to find out in your Life Between Life session what happened after that last life before you became you in this life. So we ask, who was this person in basically your immediate past life? And they might say, oh, this was my husband or my dad or my friend. And then this is where it's really fun. And who are they in your life today? Oh my gosh, it's my best friend. It's my sister. It's my partner. And this is why we ask you to bring that list of people to your session. Maybe a list of 5 or 10 important people living or passed on, with just a couple word description of each. I tell people it's like my cheat sheet. Every now and then someone will give me a whole paragraph. And it's like, yeah, I can't read that in the middle of the session. So it's just a couple words like best friend, 9-year-old friend who passed away, ex-husband. You'd be surprised who shows up in your soul group. Because in the middle of the session, when they're saying, oh, this person is John, I don't want to have to say and interrupt what's happening and say, who's John? Instead, I can look down at my little list and say, oh, that's their husband. Oh, that's their ex-husband. So that's why we ask for the list of the 5 or 10 people. And then getting reacquainted. Sometimes we get immortal soul names, not always, it's not essential. But sometimes we can. Well, if they can't, sometimes they'll say, well, I can't say it. But we'll say, well, what's the first letter? P. What's the second letter? A. Because the names are usually very unusual because we don't usually use words in the same way that we do here, over there. If anything, it's songs, but most of the communication is just thoughts. So sometimes we'll find out their immortal soul name, and then we ask, what is your immortal soul name? And then we've talked about this before, colors. What color are they projecting? Higher levels usually project darker colors. So the dark purples and blues are the most advanced souls. The whiter is often the younger souls, but there's also variation. If you look at Newton's books, there's a little bit of variation on some of the colors, and sometimes people have multiple colors. I've seen a lot of fuchsia lately, and yellow, and then green. And then I always like to ask, what message do they have for you? Or what is being communicated between the two of you? And that's where we can find out a little bit more about any contracts that were set up, or sometimes they'll have more information for you about this life and what you guys are working on together. So this is a really special place. And then, this is when Molly said, my people, how could I have forgotten my people? Well, she actually said it in her past life session, but when she saw them again, it was just like, oh my gosh, how could I have forgotten my family? So soul groups have different characteristics and sometimes different levels. Sometimes there's different levels within the group, but typically they're kind of around the same level. At least this is what I've seen. So I've seen young, silly, playful souls, and those things don't always go together, but sometimes. So young souls have a lot of energy. Sometimes they're a little silly. I like the movie Soul that was done by Pixar, and they showed the little souls like rolling around and playing. Everything in the movie wasn't exactly right, but parts were really, I think, really representative. So young, silly, playful soul groups. I've seen mischievous soul groups, and I think these are on the younger side too. They actually like to play jokes on other souls and other soul groups. It's kind of funny. And then I mentioned Heather's rogue soul group, the smoking, drinking, hell-raising souls. The names of the souls in the soul group were Hell Yeah and Roger That, and her guide called her Come Here, Come Here when she crossed over. Come here, come here, come here. And she was the one who had a life that they said she had wasted, and if she didn't straighten up, they weren't going to let her reincarnate anymore. So they were definitely kind of a wild soul group. I've seen very advanced brave souls, like Molly's soul group, where they took on adventures and they weren't afraid to die. And in her group, they kept saying, come on, we want you to take on these last few adventures because we want you over here with us. They were showing her dragons and all these wonderful magical things on the other side, and how big it was and how much freedom there was and how fun it was. So they were just saying, you just have this one more adventure to clear up this last little bit of fear karma. So they were advanced souls and brave, and that they weren't afraid to die. And then there's other advanced soul groups where they're brave and they take on the really hard, serious lessons. And then I've seen a lot of task groups where they're working together to create energy. Well, in fact, I'll talk a little bit about some of the tasks that they do, but they're more like work groups. And I've heard and seen different things, like there's soul groups that we come together as souls in the beginning, as young souls, and then later on we might have specialty soul groups, like work groups and task groups. And I don't know exactly how you get from one to the other, and once you switch, if you stay with the other one all the time, I'm still kind of learning. We're all still kind of learning, and things are always changing too. So sometimes within a group, there can be different roles. So oftentimes there's a guide. But again, for the more advanced souls, the guide may not be playing a big part of the session. I've seen a young, sensitive soul in a group. I've seen like a joker soul, and then a teacher soul. So there can be different roles within a group. And again, one of my favorite questions that I'm just now starting to ask is, what soul characteristics do you carry from life to life? What's kind of the essence of your soul that we'll see in all your different lives, even though you may take on very, very different lives for different purposes. And then activities. This is where it's really fun. So a lot of times they do, some people call them psychodramas, but basically they reenact their lives and then sort of critique each other's performances. So to them, it really is sort of like a play. Like, okay, so what happened in this soul, in this incarnation, and how did we do? And maybe we could have done it this way, and maybe this would have been better. and they give each other feedback on their performances. It's like, okay, let's all get together on a Friday night and go over each other's performances, which is just their lives. And one of the souls said, that's why, I think it was Brian's session, which we talked about one of our episodes. They said, no, any life is that big of a deal because there's always a do-over. Oh, that one didn't work out so good. Okay, we'll work on this in the next life. Remember, time is really different over there. What is it? Their 20 years is like our, their 10 minutes is like our 20 years. I remember one of the souls saying, or something along those lines. This was one when I was a very new facilitator and I didn't completely understand it, but they were creating energy, and they were like in a soul group creating energy, and then what they were doing was affecting other planes, other dimensions, other places. And at some point, I know I'll do this person's sessions again and we'll find out more, but it was very advanced work. And then I've seen souls in classrooms and big, like stadium centers, for lack of a better word, big classrooms, learning things together as souls. And then I just had this session recently, and the person I found out last night is going to come on the show next week, so be sure and watch. And she talked about the souls were throwing balls of light back and forth. She said like 50 balls at a time, and I think her soul group was rather small, but they had like 50 lights going at the same time. I picture like laser lights. And it was a game or a sport, but the lights had communication in them. She said they were a very efficient group, and they were planning how they were going to work out their lives together. And then when we got to the place of life body selection, they were actually assembling bodies, designing bodies. So she was saying that, for the lesson she wanted to learn, she needed to balance things out in the body so she could be a super smart person, but she's not that tall in this life. So there was like a little bit of a disadvantage. So she said other souls, when they go to the life body selection place, they see screens and they choose the screens. But this group was so advanced, they actually chose the options that were available on the screen. I was like asking her so many questions. I was like, what? I just assumed our own genetics created the bodies and then they chose which ones they wanted. But it's not that random. She was saying, no, they're actually designing and assembling the bodies and telling the baby bodies what they're going to need for a specific life. That was crazy. And then sometimes soul groups come to the place right before they're leaving to come back into the incarnation, to come back to Earth, to reincarnate. And they're like a little send-off, a little, well-wishing committee, just to kind of say, I hope it goes well, and sort of there wishing them well, waving as they're heading into the next life. All right, and I did want to say a little word about soulmates. So in Leah's life, they had a contract in the last life where she hurt him, and this time they wanted to focus on pure love. It can be a family member, it can be a close family member, it can be a partner, it can be a good friend. It's not always a romantic relationship, but we often have a special soulmate that we incarnate with over and over. So Leah's husband is her soulmate. Ken's cousin, he was sitting talking with him at the Tropical Cafe, rehashing and going over their lives. And he said, it feels like we've been through this 1,000 times. And they probably had, where they come back and they talk and they say, how was this? And how was your life? And they were all kind of catching up. And Lauren's husband, this is on my website, her past life session. And when she crossed over, she didn't meet her guide. Her husband showed up. And I asked, what is your relationship to this soul? And he said, I am this soul. I am this soul. We're like two halves of a whole. In fact, she said, if you could see their bodies, their foreheads were touching and their bodies were making like a heart. So they were like two halves of a whole, their bodies making a heart. And Molly in her session, her husband was her soulmate. Her name is Muriel, and that's her soul name. And his name was Uriel. And she said when the souls were all dividing, they were the last two to divide. So they came from one soul, and then they divided into two more. So soulmates are our partners that we go through lives with, changing up roles depending on what we want to learn. But oftentimes with our soulmates, we have a special romantic bond, but not always. Sometimes we incarnate as friends or close family members, and sometimes we take a life without our soulmate. So, how to recognize and find each other. I ask people, how will you know who you're going to work with? Do you have any red flags or signs to recognize them? And often it'll just be as simple as I'll just know. They'll feel like home. They'll feel familiar. And then Michael Newton and his wife Peggy were definitely soulmates. And he talks about the deep love. It's a deep, rich, lasting love that you feel with the soulmate. And granted, sometimes you may have a contract where it's not going to last, where it's going to not make it through the whole life. But it's important to not mix it up with that deep, attractive lust. It's a different thing. It's deeper and richer than that, was mostly what I wanted to point out. And then sometimes we go it alone. Sometimes people say, I feel like my soulmate isn't in this life with me. And sometimes we decide we need to work on independence. And so we decide to have separate lives. And we're going to take a break from going into a life together as partners. My husband is my soulmate. And when we did a past life session for him, he's Polish. We did the session, we were in Poland, and we were incarnating there together as farmers. It was a good, nice, simple life. And we met later in this life, and I told him, don't wait so long to find me next time. And just a note, that's how Michael Newton discovered life between lives. Remember there was the woman who came and wanted to find out the source of her deep loneliness. And when he asked her to go to the cause of the deep loneliness, she didn't go to a past life. She went to her soul group. And that's when he discovered our life between lives. And it turned out she had wanted to focus on independence. And so no one had incarnated with her in this life. And that was the source of her deep loneliness. And then he went on to do 7,000 sessions and basically found that people had kind of the same experience on the other side. And that's where we first learned about life between lives hypnosis. David, that's sweet. Yeah, it is he's talking about me and Henry. Yeah. God bless my husband. He always reminds me I have a Master's of Divinity. He says, you're an MDiv and you were working at a Presbyterian church when I met you. What happened? So he's been very supportive. Alrighty, so those were the things I wanted to share with you. I want to look and see if there's any questions. I'm not seeing any. So if you have any questions, you and your husband, he's a good sport, I'll tell you that. Okay, so I'm not seeing any questions, so I'm just going to go to a little bit of our wrap-up things. So I know we told you last time, but we're letting you know again, in honor of creating some soul community for some of us here on Earth, we are offering the 3-day Immortal Soul Journey Retreat in November. So I regularly have people who say after their sessions, like they want to share this. I mean, if you had your sessions, you want to talk to people about this, but it's not something a lot of people find that they could talk to with just about anybody with. So we're creating more opportunities for you to come together. And this is our first 3-day event. We've done day retreats, but this is our first 3-day event. It's at a beautiful retreat center up in Central California, not that far from the coast. So I hope you'll join us. Space is very limited, but we're posting the retreat discovery call link. So I think Leticia's going to post that. There we go. So if you have any questions, you can book a discovery call and you can let me know your questions and we can talk about it. So if you've had a session, this will be a great way for you to have a place to talk about it. And also, we will be doing a guided imagery and then 2 Life Between Lives events. So a group past life session and then a group back to the womb and then re-entering your life between lives and going to your council. So these are ways to get back to that place and then also have people that you can share with about it, as well as it's a beautiful, pristine countryside with gourmet organic food and a pool and a hot tub and a real true respite. a soul retreat, and that's what we wanted to give to you. So yes, sounds fun. So we'd love to have you join us. So please book a discovery call. I could share a little more about it with you. And then just to let you know, for next week, the person who let me share about assembling the souls, assembling the bodies, and throwing the lights around, the 50 lights back and forth, in this super fast game. And she said, and none of the balls ever drop, but it's just like zoom, 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 zoom. They're just communicating so fast and planning so fast. She is going to come on next Friday and share with us about her amazing sessions. So I think that's it for now. So thank you again so much for watching. I hope you are staying cool. Love you. See you next time.
Thank you for watching. Remember to like, subscribe, and follow. And join us next week for another episode of Soul Guide.